The cantina on Nexus Prime was dark and smoky. Blue lights flickered above empty tables while the sound of alien music played softly in the background. Commander Zeie sat alone in the corner booth, his four arms wrapped around a tall glass of purple liquid. His gray skin was covered in old scars and his six eyes stared at nothing in particular. The old warrior had been coming to this place for years. It was quiet here, away from the noise of the busy space station, away from the young soldiers who thought they knew everything about war, away from the questions he did not want to answer. Tonight was different, though. A group of junior officers from the Galactic Peacekeeping Force had walked in an hour ago. They were loud and full of energy, the way young soldiers always were. They talked about their recent missions and bragged about their victories. Zeie tried to ignore them, but their voices carried across the empty cantina. "Did you hear about the humans?" Lieutenant Krell asked his friends. The young Vorthon officer had blue skin and sharp teeth that showed when he smiled. "They want to join our Special Forces unit." The other officers laughed. Captain Morrison, a tall insect-like being with green shell armor, clicked his mandibles in amusement. Humans? Those soft pink creatures from that backward planet? What could they possibly know about real warfare? "I heard they still use metal bullets in some of their weapons," another officer said. "How primitive can you get? We stopped using solid projectiles centuries ago. Their whole military history is just them fighting each other over dirt and water," Krell continued. "They have never faced real enemies, never fought in space, never seen plasma weapons or energy shields. What good could they be?" The group erupted in more laughter. They ordered another round of drinks and continued making jokes about human warfare. They talked about how humans were probably too weak for real combat, how their small size and fragile bodies made them useless as soldiers, how their simple weapons and tactics belonged in a museum. Zeie felt his grip tighten on his glass. The liquid inside began to bubble as his body temperature rose. He had been listening to this kind of talk for months now. Ever since the humans had been accepted into the Galactic Federation, everyone had opinions about them. Most of those opinions were wrong. "I bet a single squad of our warriors could conquer their entire planet," Krell said loudly. "From what I read in the reports, they surrender pretty easily. No real fighting spirit." That was when Zeie stood up. His chair scraped against the metal floor with a harsh sound that made everyone in the cantina look his way. The old commander was tall, even for his species, and his presence filled the room. The scars on his face seemed to glow in the dim light. He walked slowly to the table where the young officers sat. They looked up at him with surprise and a little fear. Everyone in the peacekeeping force knew Commander Zeie. He was a legend, a veteran of more battles than any living soldier, a warrior who had served in conflicts across the galaxy for over 30 years. "Mind if I sit down?" Zeie asked, though he was already pulling out a chair. "Of course, Commander," Krell said quickly. "We were just talking about the new human recruits." "I heard," Zeie said. He set his glass on the table and looked at each of the young officers. "You think you know something about human warfare?" "Well, we have read the reports," Captain Morrison said carefully. "Their technology is primitive. Their tactics are basic. They have no experience with galactic-level conflicts." Zeie nodded slowly. He took a sip of his drink and was quiet for a long moment. The other officers waited, not sure what to say. The commander's six eyes seemed to be looking at something far away. "You are right about some things," Zeie finally said. "Their technology is behind ours. Their weapons are simple. They have never fought in space battles before." He paused and looked directly at Krell. "But you are wrong about everything else." "What do you mean, sir?" Krell asked. "You think you understand war because you have seen plasma battles and orbital bombardments," Zeie said. His voice was low and quiet, but every word carried weight. "You think you know what real combat looks like because you have fought pirates and rebels with outdated equipment." The young officers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. There was something in the commander's tone that made them nervous. "But you have never witnessed what I saw during the human integration wars," Zeie continued. "You have never seen what happens when you back a human into a corner, You have never watched them fight when they have nothing left to lose. The integration wars? Mordoon asked. But sir, that was 20 years ago. The humans lost that conflict. They were forced to accept Federation terms. Zeftai's laugh was bitter and cold. Is that what they teach you in the academy now? That the humans lost? He shook his head. The humans did not lose, young officer. We just stopped fighting them before they destroyed us all. The cantina had gone completely silent now. Even the bartender, a large furry creature from the rim, worlds, had stopped cleaning glasses to listen. Everyone knew about the integration wars, but few people talked about what really happened. I was there, Zephtai said. I served as a military observer with the hegemony forces. I watched the whole thing unfold from the beginning. I saw things that still wake me up at night. He took another drink and continued. The hegemony thought it would be easy. Humans were new to space travel. They had no real military presence beyond their own solar system. Their weapons were primitive, their ships were slow and clumsy. It should have been a simple annexation operation. But it was not simple, Krell asked quietly. Simple? Zephtai repeated. It was the most terrifying 3 years of my life, and I have fought in over 40 different conflicts across the galaxy. The old warrior leaned back in his chair. His eyes grew distant as he remembered events from 2 decades ago, events that had changed how he viewed warfare forever. The first battle should have ended it, he said. The hegemony sent 3 battle cruisers to Earth, massive ships with crews of thousands, advanced weapon systems, energy shields that could stop any projectile. The humans had nothing that could match them. So what happened? Another officer asked. The humans did not surrender, Zephtai said simply. That was our first mistake. We thought they would see our superior technology and give up immediately. Every other species we had encountered did exactly that. They saw our power and submitted to avoid destruction. He paused and looked at each of the young officers again. But humans are not like other species. They do not think like other species. They do not fight like other species. How do they fight? Mordoon asked. Zephtai smiled, but there was no humor in it. Like demons, like creatures that have crawled. Out of some dark corner of the universe where death and pain mean nothing, they fight like beings who would rather die than kneel. The silence stretched on for several seconds. Finally, Krell spoke up. But Commander, surely you are exaggerating. They are just another species. They cannot be that different from the rest of us. That is what we thought too, Zephtai said. Right up until the moment we realized we had awakened something that should have been left alone. Something that other species in the galaxy pray they never have to face. He finished his drink and stood up. You want to know about human warfare? You want to understand why the Federation now considers them the most valuable military asset in the galaxy? He looked down at the young officers. Then listen carefully, because I am going to tell you a story that will change how you think about war forever. Zephtai sat back down and signaled the bartender for another drink. The young officers leaned forward, suddenly very interested in what the old veteran had to say. It started with first contact, Zephtai began. And it ended with the galaxy learning a lesson it will never forget. The bartender brought Zephtai his drink, but the old commander did not touch it right away. He stared at the purple liquid as if he could see the past floating in it. The young officers waited in silence, afraid to interrupt his thoughts. The Hegemony Council was confident, Zephtai finally said. They had studied human civilization for months before making contact. They knew about human wars, human weapons, human military structure. On paper, it looked simple. Humans fought with metal bullets while we had plasma cannons. They used chemical rockets while we had faster-than-light engines. They had never left their solar system while we controlled half the galaxy. He took a sip of his drink and continued. The plan was perfect. 3 battle cruisers would appear in Earth's orbit. We would demonstrate our superior technology. The humans would realize they could not win and would surrender. Then we would integrate their planet into the hegemony peacefully. No unnecessary deaths, no destruction, just a quick show of force. Lieutenant Krell leaned forward. But something went wrong? Everything went wrong, Zeie said. Starting with the moment our ships appeared above their planet. Do you know what the first human response was? Not surrender. Not fear. Not even attempts at negotiation. What was it? Captain Morrison asked. They started shooting, Zeie said simply. Every human military installation on the planet opened, fire simultaneously. Missiles, artillery, aircraft, everything they had. Most of their weapons could not even reach our ships in orbit, but they fired anyway. The alien officers looked confused. But that makes no sense, one of them said. They had to know their weapons were useless against your shields. Of course they knew, Zeie replied. That is what made it so terrifying. They knew they could not hurt us, but they attacked anyway. Not because they thought they could win, but because they refused to surrender without a fight. He paused, and his 6 eyes grew distant again. Admiral Vexitar was commanding the operation from the lead cruiser. He had conquered dozens of worlds, using the same strategy. He was sure the humans would stop firing once they realized how hopeless their situation was. Did they stop? Krell asked quietly. No, Zeie said. They got worse. When their ground-based weapons failed to reach us, they started launching everything they had into space. Military satellites, space stations, even civilian spacecraft loaded with explosives. They turned their entire orbital infrastructure into weapons. The old warrior's voice became quieter, more thoughtful. I was on the bridge of the second cruiser observing the operation for my report to the Galactic Council. I watched the tactical displays show hundreds of human craft heading toward our position. Small fighters, cargo ships, passenger vessels, anything that could fly. Most of them had no real weapons. Some were piloted by single humans with nothing but determination. What happened to them? Morrison asked. Our defense systems destroyed them all, Zeie said. Every single one. But that was not the point. The point was that they kept coming, wave after wave of humans flying toward certain death. Not because they had a plan or because they thought they could win. They came because someone had to try. He took another drink and his hands trembled slightly. That was when I started to understand that we were dealing with something different. Something dangerous. Dangerous, Krell repeated. But you said your ships destroyed all their attacks. Physical danger is not the only kind of danger, Zeie explained. There is also the danger of fighting an enemy that does not behave logically. An enemy that makes choices based on principles instead of tactics. An enemy that would rather die than live under your rule. The cantina had grown even quieter. Other customers had moved closer to listen to the old veteran's story. Word was spreading through the station that Commander Zeie was talking about the integration wars, something he rarely did. Admiral Vexitar decided to make an example, Zeie continued. He chose a human military base and destroyed it, with a single plasma blast. The entire installation vanished in seconds. Thousands of humans died. He broadcast a message to the planet saying that more bases would be destroyed unless they surrendered immediately. Did that work? An officer asked. Zeie's laugh was bitter. It made things worse. Much worse. The humans did not see the destruction as a reason to surrender. They saw it as a reason to fight harder. He leaned forward and his voice became intense. Within hours, human forces around the planet began launching coordinated attacks. Not random desperate strikes, but organized military operations. They had been planning for this moment, preparing for an invasion they knew was coming. How could they have known? Morrison wondered. Because humans always assume someone is trying to kill them, Zeie said. They have been fighting wars for thousands of years, fighting each other, fighting nature, fighting anything that threatens them. It is built into their thinking. When we appeared in their sky, they did not see potential allies or even conquerors. They saw enemies. The old commander stood up and walked to the window. Outside, ships of a dozen different species moved through the busy space lanes around Nexus Prime. Peaceful trade vessels, passenger transports, diplomatic craft, a normal scene of galactic civilization. The real shock came when we tried to land. Ground forces, he said without turning around. The hegemony sent down assault troops to secure strategic positions. These were veteran soldiers with advanced armor, energy weapons, and air support. They expected to face primitive human armies with metal guns and wheeled vehicles. What did they find instead? Krell asked. Zephtai turned back to face the group. They found Sergeant Jake Morrison and his squad of Marines. The way he said the human name made everyone in the cantina pay attention. There was respect in his voice, but also fear. Morrison was a human soldier stationed at a base called Camp Pendleton. When our dropships landed nearby, he was ordered to hold his position until reinforcements arrived. His squad had 12 humans. Our assault force had over 200 soldiers with the best equipment in the galaxy. The humans were outnumbered, Morden observed. Numbers meant nothing to them, Zephtai said. Morrison looked at the situation and decided that dying in place was not acceptable. He was going to attack. The alien officers exchanged glances. Attack? Against overwhelming odds? That is what humans do, Zephtai replied. They do not calculate odds the way we do. They do not think about what is possible or reasonable. They think about what needs to be done. He sat back down and continued his story. Morrison split his squad into 3 groups. He sent 4 humans to flank the landing zone from the north. He sent 4 more to attack from the south. He kept 4 with him for a direct assault. 12 humans against 200 trained soldiers, Krell said. It should have been a massacre. It was, Zephtai agreed. But not the kind we expected. The old warrior's voice became very quiet. Morrison's squad had been studying alien technology for weeks, ever since our ships appeared. They had figured out how our energy shields worked. They knew our weapons had longer range but slower firing rates than their bullets. They had identified weak points in our armor. He paused and looked at each officer. But most importantly, they had something we did not understand, something we had never encountered in any other species. What was that? Morden asked. They had no fear of death, Zephtai said. Not because they were brave, but because they had already accepted that they were going to die. In their minds, they were already dead. The only question was how many enemies they could take with them. The silence stretched on for several seconds before Zephtai continued. The attack began at dawn. Morrison's flanking groups hit our perimeter simultaneously while he led the center assault. They used their primitive weapons in ways our computers could not predict. They turned their own vehicles into bombs. They used the terrain against us. They fought like creatures that had been born in war. What was the result? Krell asked quietly. Zephtai finished his drink in one gulp. We won. Of course. Our superior technology and numbers made victory inevitable. But when the fighting ended, we had lost 60 soldiers. 60 experienced warriors killed by 12 humans with metal bullets and explosive charges. The young officers stared at him in shock. 60? Morden repeated. Including Morrison, Zephtai said. He died trying to plant a bomb on our command vehicle. Got within 10 meters before our weapons finally stopped him. But by then, his example had spread to every human military unit on the planet. He signaled for another drink. That was when we realized we were not fighting a normal war. We were fighting something else entirely. Something that would change everything we thought we knew about combat. The cantina was completely silent now. Even the background music had stopped playing. Everyone was listening to Commander Zephtai's story. The old warrior seemed lost in his memories, staring at his empty glass as if he could see the past reflected in it. Morrison's last stand changed everything, Zephtai said finally. Word of what happened spread across the human planet in hours. Not just military reports, but videos, pictures, personal accounts. The humans have something called the internet that connects their entire world. Every human saw what 12 Marines had done against impossible odds. Lieutenant Krell shifted uncomfortably in his seat. That must have discouraged them, seeing their soldiers die. You still do not understand, Zephtai replied, shaking his head. It did not discourage them, it inspired them. Within days, every human military unit was requesting permission to attack our positions. They were volunteering for suicide missions. They were competing to see who could hurt us the most. The alien commander signaled for another drink. Admiral Vexitar realized that traditional tactics were not working. The humans were not going to surrender after losing a few battles. They were going to fight until every last one of them was dead. So he decided to try a different approach. What kind of approach? Captain Morrison asked. Urban warfare, Zeie said. The Admiral chose a human city called New Denver and surrounded it with ground forces. The plan was to capture it quickly, show the humans we could take their population centers and force them to negotiate. He paused as the bartender brought his drink. New Denver had about 2 million human civilians and a small military garrison. Our intelligence said it would fall in days. We had orbital bombardment capability, advanced armor, energy weapons, and air support. The humans had concrete buildings and metal guns. How long did it actually take? Morrison asked quietly. 3 months, Zeie said. 3 months of the most brutal urban combat I have ever witnessed. And I have been in siege warfare on a dozen different worlds. The old veteran took a long drink before continuing. The human commander was Colonel Maria Santos. She had been in charge of the garrison for only 6 months before we arrived. Young for a human officer, but experienced in what they call guerrilla warfare. What made her special? Krell asked. She understood something that most military commanders never learn, Zeie replied. She understood that in urban warfare, every civilian is a potential soldier, and every building is a potential fortress. More importantly, she understood that humans would rather die fighting than live under occupation. He leaned forward, his 6 eyes focused on the young officers. Santos turned New Denver into a nightmare for our forces. Every street became a killing ground. Every building became a bunker. Every sewer tunnel became a supply route. The humans did not just defend their city, they weaponized it. How? Another officer asked. They used their knowledge of the city against us, Zeie explained. We had maps and satellite images, but they had grown up there. They knew every alley, every basement, every hidden passage. They turned their own homes into traps. The commander's voice grew quieter, more intense. On the first day of the siege, we sent in a reconnaissance company to test their defenses. 50 soldiers with full combat gear and air support. They entered the city from the north, following the main road toward the government district. What happened to them? Krell asked. They disappeared, Zeie said simply. Not killed in open combat, not destroyed by heavy weapons. They just vanished into the city. We lost contact with them one by one as they moved deeper into the urban area. The alien officers looked confused. How is that possible? Because the humans were fighting a different kind of war, Zeie replied. They were not trying to hold territory or protect strategic positions. They were trying to make the city uninhabitable for us. Every soldier who entered New Denver became a target for the entire population. He took another drink and continued. We found the bodies of our reconnaissance company 3 days later. They had been killed by sniper fire, improvised explosives, and close combat attacks. Some had been taken down by human children throwing bottles filled with burning fuel. Others had been killed by elderly humans using hunting rifles from apartment windows. Children and elderly civilians? Morrison asked, in shock. The humans do not separate military and civilian populations the way other species do, Zeie explained. When their city was threatened, everyone became a defender. Store owners, teachers, doctors, mechanics, even teenagers. They all picked up weapons and joined the fight. The old warrior stood up and walked to the window again. I remember watching the tactical displays in our command center. Every day we controlled more territory on paper. Every day we pushed deeper into the city, but every day we lost more soldiers to attacks that came from nowhere. What about your superior technology? Krell asked. Your energy weapons and armor should have given you a major advantage. Technology means nothing if you cannot see your enemy, Zeie replied. The humans learned to fight from hiding. They would attack and then disappear into the civilian population. They dressed like non-combatants, moved through areas we thought were secure and struck when we least expected it. He turned back to face the group. But the worst part was not the attacks themselves. It was the effect they had on our soldiers. Every corner could hide an enemy. Every building could contain a bomb. Every human civilian could be carrying a weapon. Our troops started to break down mentally. Break down how? Morrison asked. Fear, Zeie said simply. Fear of an enemy they could not identify until it was too late. Fear of a population that refused to be conquered. Fear of fighting in a place where the rules of warfare meant nothing. The commander sat back down and his voice became very quiet. I watched veteran soldiers, warriors who had fought in dozens of battles, start to panic at the sight of human children. I saw officers refuse to enter certain areas of the city because too many of their friends had died there. I watched our morale collapse as we realized we were not fighting an army. We were fighting an entire civilization. What did Colonel Santos do during all this? Krell asked. She coordinated the defense from a mobile command post, Zeie replied, never staying in one place for more than a few hours. She had human civilians acting as messengers, carrying orders through the city's underground tunnels. She turned every neighborhood into an independent fighting unit that could operate without central command. He paused and looked at each of the young officers. But what impressed me most was her use of psychological warfare. Santos understood that we were not just fighting for territory. We were fighting for the will to continue. She made sure every attack on our forces was recorded and broadcast to the rest of the planet. Broadcast? Morrison asked. The humans have communication technology that lets them share information instantly across their world. Zeie explained. Every time our soldiers were killed, every time we failed to take an objective, every time we had to retreat, the entire human population saw it happen. The old warrior's voice grew bitter. Santos was not just defending New Denver. She was showing every human on the planet that we could be beaten, that our advanced technology and superior numbers meant nothing against determined resistance. Did it work? Krell asked quietly. Human military units across the planet started using the same tactics, Zeie replied. Every city we approached became another New Denver. Every town became a fortress. Every village became a death trap. We went from fighting one army to fighting an entire species. He finished his drink and set the glass down carefully. That was when I started to understand the true horror of what we had started. We were not just at war with human soldiers, we were at war with human civilization itself, and human civilization had decided that it would rather burn than surrender. The silence in the cantina was complete. No one moved, no one spoke, no one even seemed to breathe. Finally, Krell found his voice. What happened next? He asked. Zeie smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Next came the counterattack. The moment when Colonel Santos and Lieutenant Commander Ryan Clark showed us what humans could do when they stopped playing defense and started playing offense. Commander Zeie ordered another drink and waited for it to arrive before continuing his story. The young officers sat frozen in their chairs, afraid to miss a single word. The rest of the cantina had gone completely silent. Even the bartender had stopped working to listen. The counterattack began on day 73 of the siege, Zeie said. We thought we were winning. Our forces controlled most of the outer districts of New Denver. We had pushed the human defenders back to the city center. Admiral Vexistar was planning the final assault when everything changed. He took a sip of his drink and his hands trembled slightly. It started at 400 hours. Complete darkness, no moon, heavy cloud cover, perfect conditions for what the humans call a night raid. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Clark led the attack with 200 human soldiers. 200 against how many of your forces? Lieutenant Krell asked. We had over 3,000 troops. Surrounding the city, Zeie replied. Plus air support, armored vehicles, and orbital fire support. Clark's force should have been destroyed before they got within a kilometer of our positions. But they were not, Captain Morrison asked quietly. They got past our entire perimeter without being detected, Zeie said. Not through our lines, under them. The humans had been digging tunnels for weeks, a whole network of underground passages that connected the city to the surrounding area. We never knew they existed. The old warrior's voice became very quiet. Clark divided his force into 20 small teams. Each team had a specific target: command posts, supply depots, communication centers, air defense positions. They hit everything, at once. How did they coordinate without being detected? Another officer asked. They used their own bodies as communication systems, Zeie explained. No radio signals, no electronic messages. They had memorized the timing of every attack down to the second. Each team knew exactly when to strike, what to hit, and how long they had before reinforcements arrived. He paused and looked at each of the young officers. But the real genius was not in the planning, it was in how they fought. These humans had been studying our tactics for months. They knew our weaknesses better than we did. What weaknesses? Krell asked. Our energy weapons. Were powerful but slow to recharge, Zephtai replied. Our armor was strong but heavy. Our night vision was better than human eyes, but it could be overloaded by bright lights. Clark's teams exploited every single limitation. The commander stood up and began pacing behind his chair. They attacked our command post first. The humans had built devices that created blinding flashes of light. When our guards were temporarily blinded, the attack team moved in with their metal weapons and explosive charges. Metal weapons against energy armor? Morrison asked in confusion. Human bullets could not penetrate our armor directly, Zephtai agreed, but they could damage the power systems that ran the armor. And once the power failed, the armor became just heavy metal clothing. He sat back down and continued. While one team was attacking the command post, another team hit our air support base. They used their primitive missiles to destroy our aircraft while they were still on the ground. No air battles, no complex tactics, they just blew up our ships before we could use them. How many casualties did you take? Krell asked quietly. In the first hour, we lost over 400 soldiers, Zephtai said. 400 experienced. Warriors killed by humans using weapons that belonged in a museum. But that was not the worst part. What was worse? Morrison asked. The humans did not just kill our soldiers, Zephtai replied. They captured our equipment. Within hours of the attack, Clark's teams were using our own weapons against us. They learned to operate alien technology faster than should have been possible. The old warrior's voice became filled with a mixture of admiration and fear. I watched human soldiers who had never seen energy weapons before figure out how to use them in minutes. They took our communication equipment and used it to coordinate attacks across the entire planet. They stole our vehicles and turned them into weapons platforms. How could they learn so quickly? An officer asked. Because humans are natural engineers, Zephtai explained. They have been taking things apart and putting them back together for thousands of years. Give a human any piece of technology, and they will find a way to use it, improve it, or turn it into a weapon. He took another drink before continuing. Staff Sergeant Tony Martinez led one of Clark's teams that night. His mission was to capture our main supply depot. Instead of just destroying it, he decided to take everything useful and disappear back into the city. What did he take? Krell asked. Energy cells, armor components, medical supplies, communication equipment, food, ammunition, Zephtai listed. Everything our forces needed to continue the siege. But Martinez did not just steal supplies. He stole knowledge. Knowledge? Morrison repeated. Martinez captured 3 of our technicians alive, Zephtai said. He did not torture them or threaten them. He just talked to them, asked them questions about how our technology worked, showed genuine curiosity about alien engineering. The commander's voice grew thoughtful. Those technicians later said that Martinez was the most intelligent being they had ever met. He understood complex concepts immediately. He asked questions that showed he was thinking 3 steps ahead of their explanations. What did he do with that knowledge? Another officer asked. He taught it to other humans, Zephtai replied. Within days, human engineers across the planet were building copies of our equipment using their own materials. Crude copies, but functional ones. He stood up and walked to the window again. Corporal Janet Brooks was part of Martinez's team. She was a human engineer who specialized in communications technology. During the raid, she captured one of our quantum communication devices. Those devices are incredibly complex, Krell said. It takes years of training to understand how they work. Brooks figured it out in 2 days, Zephtai said simply. Not only did she learn to use it, she improved it. She found ways to boost the signal strength and extend the range. Then she taught her improvements to every human technical specialist on the planet. The alien officers stared at him in shock. Improved it? Morrison asked. That is impossible. Those devices represent centuries of scientific advancement. Nothing is impossible for humans when they are fighting for their survival, Zeie replied. They do not see technology as sacred or unchangeable. They see it as tools that can be modified, combined, or reimagined for new purposes. He returned to his seat and continued the story. The raid on our supply depot was just the beginning. Captain Steve Robinson led another team that attacked our vehicle maintenance area. Instead of destroying our aircraft, he stole them. Stole them? But human pilots had never flown alien spacecraft before, Krell protested. Robinson learned by watching combat footage, Zeie said. The humans had been recording every air battle since the war began. Robinson studied how our pilots maneuvered, how they used their weapons, how they communicated with ground control. That still should not have been enough, Morrison argued. Robinson did not just study our tactics, Zeie explained. He studied our mistakes. Every time one of our aircraft was shot down, every time a pilot made an error, every time our formations were broken. He learned from our failures faster than we learned from them ourselves. The old warrior's voice became filled with grudging respect. By dawn, Robinson was leading a squadron of captured alien fighters against our remaining air support. Human pilots who had learned to fly our aircraft in a single night were shooting down veteran pilots who had been flying for years. How is that possible? Krell asked weakly. Because humans learn differently than other species, Zeie replied. They do not just memorize information. They understand it, adapt it, and use it in ways the original designers never intended. He finished his drink and signaled for another. Engineer Kate Phillips was the most terrifying of all. She was part of the team that captured our shield generator facility. While other humans were stealing equipment, Phillips was stealing ideas. What kind of ideas? Morrison asked. She reverse-engineered our energy shield technology using nothing but spare parts and basic tools, Zeie said. Not only did she figure out how our shields worked, she found ways to make them stronger and more efficient. The silence stretched on for several seconds before Krell spoke. What happened after the counterattack? Zeie smiled grimly. We discovered that capturing New Denver was no longer our biggest problem. Our biggest problem was that we had taught the humans how to fight us, and now they were teaching the rest of their species everything they had learned. Commander Zeie sat in silence for a long moment, staring at his empty glass. The cantina was so quiet that everyone could hear the hum of the space station's life support systems. The young officers waited, knowing that the old warrior was approaching the most important part of his story. By the end of year 2, we were no longer fighting the same war. Zeie finally said. The humans had spread their knowledge across the entire planet. Every human military unit now had access to our technology. They were building their own versions of our weapons, vehicles, and equipment. He looked up at the young officers with his 6 eyes. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was that they were making our technology better. Better how? Lieutenant Krell asked quietly. Human engineers are not bound by tradition or established thinking, Zeie explained. When they captured our energy weapons, they did not just copy them. They found ways to make them fire faster, hit harder, and use less power. When they stole our armor, they made it lighter and stronger. When they took our vehicles, they made them faster and more maneuverable. Captain Morrison shifted uncomfortably in his seat. But surely the Hegemony Council sent reinforcements. More ships, more soldiers. They sent everything, Zeie replied. By year 3, we had over 50 battle cruisers in Earth's solar system. 500,000 soldiers. The largest invasion force in galactic history. We should have been able to conquer 100 worlds with that kind of power. What went wrong? Another officer asked. The humans had learned to fight in space, Zeie said simply. They built their own warships using our technology. Ships that looked primitive but fought like demons. They turned their entire solar system into a fortress. The old warrior stood up and began pacing again. General Patricia Murphy was in command of human space forces by then. She was a brilliant strategist who understood something that most military commanders never learn. What was that? Krell asked. She understood that winning and surviving are not the same thing, Zeie replied. Murphy was not trying to defeat the hegemony. She was trying to make the cost of conquering humanity so high that we would give up and leave. He returned to his seat and continued. Murphy's strategy was simple but terrifying. Every time we destroyed a human ship, 2 more would appear. Every time we captured a human base, they would build 3 more. Every time we thought we had won a battle, we discovered we had actually lost the war. How could they build ships so quickly? Morrison asked. Because humans do not think about resources the way other species do, Zeie explained. When they needed metal for ships, they tore apart their own cities. When they needed power sources, they converted their civilian technology. When they needed weapons, they turned their industrial facilities into weapon factories. The commander's voice became filled with awe and fear. I watched human civilians volunteer to have their homes demolished so the metal could be used for warships. I saw human families give up everything they owned to support the war effort. I witnessed an entire species willingly destroy their own civilization to prevent us from taking it. That makes no sense, Krell protested. Why destroy what you are trying to protect? Because humans understand something that most species do not, Zeie replied. Freedom is more valuable than life itself. They would rather live in ruins as free beings than live in palaces as slaves. He took a sip of his new drink and continued. The final battle happened above Earth itself. Admiral Carl Jackson commanded the human fleet from a ship they had built in their orbital shipyards. It was half the size of our battle cruisers, but twice as dangerous. What made it so dangerous? Morrison asked. Human creativity, Zeie said. Jackson's ship was not designed like any vessel we had ever seen. It did not follow standard shipbuilding principles. It was built specifically to fight us, using everything the humans had learned about our weaknesses. The old warrior's voice became very quiet. The ship had no heavy armor, but it was incredibly fast. It had no massive weapons, but it carried hundreds of small fighters. It had no shields, but it was almost impossible to hit. Jackson had created a warship that was designed to be everything our ships were not. How did the battle go? Krell asked. We lost, Zeie said simply. Not because the humans had superior technology or greater numbers. We lost because Jackson understood something about warfare that we had forgotten. What was that? Another officer asked. That the purpose of fighting is not to destroy your enemy, Zeie explained. The purpose of fighting is to make your enemy stop fighting. Jackson was not trying to destroy our fleet. He was trying to show us that we could never win. The commander leaned forward and his voice became intense. Jackson surrounded his ship with our battle cruisers. He was outnumbered 50-1. Any reasonable commander would have surrendered or tried to escape. Instead, Jackson opened a communication channel to our entire fleet. What did he say? Morrison asked. He gave us a choice, Zeie replied. We could continue fighting and destroy his ship, but the humans would never stop building more ships. We could conquer their planet, but they would never stop fighting back. We could kill every human in space, but billions more on the planet would continue the war. The alien officers stared at him in silence. Finally, Krell spoke. What was the alternative? Peace, Zeie said. Jackson offered to end the war immediately if we agreed to leave human space and never return. No surrender, no tribute, no occupation. Just a mutual agreement to leave each other alone. But the hegemony had invested 3 years in the conquest. Morrison protested. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers, dozens of ships, enormous resources. The council would never agree to just walk away. Jackson knew that, Zeie replied. So he made his offer more persuasive. How? Krell asked. He showed us what would happen if we refused, Zeie said. Jackson had positioned nuclear weapons throughout the solar system. Not aimed at our ships, but aimed at every human city and military base on Earth. The young officers looked confused. He was threatening his own people? He was showing us that humans would rather die free than live. As slaves, Zeie explained. Jackson made it clear that if we refused his offer, he would detonate every weapon simultaneously. The entire human species would die, but we would gain nothing. No planet to rule, no population to control, no resources to exploit. Just a dead world in empty space. The silence in the cantina was complete. No one moved. No one spoke. No one even seemed to breathe. Did you believe he would do it? Morrison asked quietly. After 3 years of fighting humans, I believed he would do worse than that, Zeie replied. I believed he would find a way to take us with them. The old warrior finished his drink and set the glass down carefully. Admiral Vexitar accepted Jackson's offer. The hegemony fleet withdrew from human space that same day. The war was over. But why are humans now part of the Galactic Federation? Krell asked. If they forced you to leave, why did they join? Because humans are not just warriors, Zeie explained. They are also explorers, scientists, and builders. Once they had proven they could not be conquered, they wanted to join the galactic community as equals, not subjects. He stood up and looked at each of the young officers. That is why humans now serve as elite troops in the peacekeeping force. Not because they have the best weapons or the most advanced technology, because they have something no other species possesses. What is that? Morrison asked. They have the will to fight when fighting is hopeless, Zeie said. They have the courage to die when dying is meaningless. They have the strength to sacrifice everything for principles that exist only in their minds. The commander picked up his glass and raised it in a salute. The galaxy learned that day that there are some species you never want to fight, and humans are at the top of that list. They do not just wage war, they embody it. They are war itself, walking on 2 legs, and refusing to quit. He drained his glass and set it down. Now you know why I respect humans, and why I fear them. Because any species that would rather destroy itself than surrender is capable of anything. The young officers sat in stunned silence as commander. Zeie walked out of the cantina, leaving them to contemplate what they had learned about humanity and war.